next guest is an economist, an expert in finance, and the president of the Salvadoran American Chamber of Commerce, an organization that continues to become ever more influential in the D.C. region and even beyond. Carlos Romero, welcome to Hispanic Agenda. It's a pleasure to have you on. We've been trying to get you on for a while now.
Alejandro, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your program, Hispanic Agenda. It's a program that has grown, so I'm looking forward to this interview.
You know, a lot of people know you personally in the business community. They have either exchanged information with you or conversation with you, but to our audience members, specifically those of Salvadorian descent, I think they have a person here who they have plenty to be proud of. You're an economist, you're a political scientist, you're an expert in finance, you're also the leader of one of the most important business organizations in our region, the Salvadoran American Chamber of Commerce. So we just kind of want to get to know you better. Were you born here in the United States, or are you an immigrant?
No, Alejandro, I'm an immigrant. I came here, I'm the youngest of 7. My parents brought me to the United States when I was 9 years old. We lived in Washington, D.C., right off of 16th and Columbia Road.
El Barrio.
El Barrio. And I had the opportunity to go to a bilingual school called Oyster Elementary School here in D.C. And then we moved to, I went to Chevy Chase Elementary School, then Westland Middle School, and then Bethesda Chevy Chase in Maryland, in Bethesda, and then went on to graduate as an economist and a political scientist out of College Park, Maryland. So I had a great pleasure to educate myself here. So it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
What's your family's background, your parents? When they came here, I would imagine fleeing the Civil War in El Salvador.
Yes, during that period, Salvador was going through a civil war. Like all immigrants from El Salvador, they were looking to better themselves, try to flee the war. And so that was a result of my parents making a decision. They had traveled here to the United States before we came, and so they had lived here a brief period, and then eventually when things got a bit messy, let's put it that way, in El Salvador, they opted to bring all of us to the United States. So that certainly was a result of the war in El Salvador.
Were they professionals back in El Salvador?
No. Well, my parents, my mom was a housewife.
Okay.
My dad owned, it was in the farm industry, had cattle, they had cotton fields, watermelon fields. So I say I had a nice upbringing in El Salvador. I cannot say that I lacked the source, the education or the upbringing.
But coming to the United States, even if you had a somewhat privileged background, it's still difficult as an immigrant. I would imagine 9 years old, living in Columbia Road and 16th Street. I mean, that's the barrio.
That's the barrio. It's interesting, right?
You know, and from there, you go on to become, you know, this very accomplished man. You know, I want to talk to you about that because I think that many times we need to see in ourselves, you know, specifically younger folks, to see what they can become, you know, and motivate them by showing them real life examples of success.
Alejandro, it's interesting. When I grew up here in Washington, D.C., you're right, it's the barrio, but where I saw the difference and I really hit home, it was when I was in high school, and a group of us applied to University of Maryland. I took some time off, ended up I was accepted at the Faculty of Economics at Maryland. And on campus, I had the opportunity to live on campus, and there was a handful of Hispanics, not just Salvadoran Americans, but just Hispanics that were going to college. And I think we, as Hispanic Americans, we need to set an example for the next generation. We have to go to colleges. Don't just finish with high school. Continue. Undergraduate, postgraduate, get a master's, get a doctorate. And I think that's the challenge that we faced here as Salvadoran Americans, as Hispanic Americans as a whole.
I mean, that could be true in any major
in any nation,
city, right? Right.
The thing is that if we don't do it, we're gonna be sitting on the back seat. We're gonna be the second-class citizens. And until we change that perception, not only to demonstrate to the country that we're able to do this, It's for our own good.
You know, this is a message on personal responsibility, which I think is absolutely needed and welcome by many in our community. Let's take a small break, and then when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with our guest, Carlos Romero. Stay with Hispanic Agenda here on News Channel 8. Hey, welcome back to Hispanic Agenda. Carlos Romero, president of the Salvadoran American Chamber of Commerce, is our guest, and we're going to continue this conversation, which I'm enjoying. I'm sure the audience is as well. I do want to get into the activities of the Salvadoran American Chamber of Commerce, but I want to go back to your personal history a little bit.
Sure.
You haven't lived in Maryland your whole life. Your career has taken you overseas, including to places like London, for example.
Yes, Alejandro. I had the opportunity to work for USAID, the World Bank, and the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. My role as the World Bank, I traveled to Latin America where I assessed banks and I set up policies and procedures for lending, micro-lending, small, medium-sized businesses. In London, I had the opportunity to live there 2 years as an in-country advisor, bank advisor. I traveled much of the time. I was there in London, but I traveled to Ukraine, Russia, France, Spain, Poland, so I was always traveling. That role there was to create policies and procedures, meet with banks, and set up policies and procedures to lend to the small and medium-sized businesses in those countries, especially Eastern Europe, where they were transitioning over from, should we call it a communist era, to a more democratic era, and so that was my role, to help them transition the banks so that they could lend to
I sense that that's what you like to do, go and fix things, go and grow things, go and make things better.
Alejandro, you're really good at assessing folks. I'll tell you that right now. I always get a kick, a challenge out of going in and solving issues, trying to make the world better